Good evening. I would like to welcome you to our second financial literacy workshop. And our facilitator is Ms. Paulette Johnson. She is the owner of Lifestyle Financing Coaching. She trained under David Ramsey. She's a member and certified credit specialist with Credit Consultants Association, and she has a bachelor's degree in business administration. I will allow her to tell you something about herself, but anyway, this is presented by Hope. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming tonight. I wanted to start off with kind of giving you a little bit more background on my business, Lifestyles Financial Coaching. I do provide one-on-one coaching sessions. I do workshops similar to what we're doing tonight. And in those workshops, I discuss money management, budgeting, debt elimination, and we talk about what's in your credit score. I also do some workshops that are tailor-made to whatever the organization requests. If they decide that they want me to, they'll give me the topics and they'll ask me to come up with the literature and the information and the packets that are being handed out. So I just wanted to emphasize that as well on tonight, that after the workshops, if you decide you want to meet with me one-on-one, do a pre-consultation, talk about what your goals are, what your needs are, if my services are affordable for you, if we can work something out. I do stress the importance of making sure that we're a good fit. I don't coach everyone because some people just, I believe, may not be a good fit for the morals and the values that I hold. So I usually do that pre-consultation first, free of charge, ask a series of questions, find out what your goals are, how committed you're going to be, because I would think if you want to spend money that you are going to want to be committed to it. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about recap, talk about what we did in the first session. We talked about mindsets, money matters, that your mindsets, they directly affect your actions, and your actions are connected to your values. So the things that you hold, that you believe, the things that you say you're striving for, when you set goals, they should reflect in your actions. And if they don't, then your values are not lined up with your goals. So your values shape your decisions shape your life, but only you determine what's important and what you're willing to do and what you want out of life. So I ask you again on tonight, what do you want in life? And what are you willing to do to obtain it? A lot of people come up with things that they want, but when it comes down to really putting the work in, then they decide, you know what, I still want those things, but I really am not willing to put the work in. And it requires some discipline. It requires making some sacrifices. Going back to what I said last time, the three important things: commitment, understanding, and patience. You have to be committed to the process. It doesn't change overnight. It's a process. It's a marathon, not a race. Understanding. You have to understand where you are in order to get to where you want to be. So you got to understand where you are and face some realizations of some things that need to be changed. And then you got to have patience. Run this race with patience. Take your time. Make sure, if you're married, talk it over with your spouse. Get on the same page, because a house divided cannot stand. So if you're not united, you're both moving in separate directions, you got to come together so you can walk down that same path. So I try to tell people, look at your goals like a roadmap. And so whenever you want to take a trip, it gives you direct step-by-step instructions on where you need to turn, if there's construction coming up, if there's a toll coming up. When you're traveling, it kind of lays out that plan for you. And it's really no different when you set goals for your life, that you want to make sure that you write your goals down, that you come up with a plan. Because if you don't write it down, you're more than likely not going to commit to it. So before we get into the goals and talking about setting goals, because I don't want you to just think about financial goals, I want you to also think about other goals, because everything affects the money. When it comes right down to it, if your mental health is jacked up, your money's jacked up. If your physical body is jacked up, your money is messed up. So you got to have a good balance when you set goals, to make sure that, you know, you're taking care of your mental well-being. You're, you know, making sure you're physically fit, or trying to get to that point that you're in your career, in your profession, that you're striving for something better. Because when something is, I talked about last time about being out of alignment. When you're out of alignment, then, you know, everything wants to try to go in separate directions. But once you get things in alignment, then it all flows and it works together. But you have to have that commitment, that understanding, and that patience. So before we get started, I want to talk about the homework assignment. The results are in, and now we're going to follow the money. When you wrote down all that information about how you were spending your money, one thing that I realized when I did this exercise, like way back, that I was going out to eat way too much, and it wasn't called for. It was like, wait a minute, how are you spending $200 a month going out to eat, in addition to buying groceries? So it's like, okay, I identified that was one area that I needed to change. I had to cut back, so I had to give myself a limit. I had to say, okay, instead of $200 a month, I'm gonna spend $50 a month on going out. So then that caused me to be selective on when I was gonna go out and where I was gonna go out. So since I only had $50, then I had to decide which place was worth going to spend my $50, because once it's gone, you gotta wait till the next month. You can't dip into your savings or spend money that, you know, you don't have. So that's really what it all amounts down to, is just creating a budget and sticking with it. Deciding how much money you're gonna spend in miscellaneous items, those things that you can control. One other thing that I found was that when I made cash withdrawals, if I withdrew more than what I needed, then I wouldn't know what I spent that money on. It's like, okay, I withdrew $100, and I typically make my withdrawals to get my hair done. When I go get my hair done, I withdraw $100, but I don't need 100. So I'm like, okay, what did I do with the rest of that money that I withdrew? And I don't know. So it's best that if you have cash and you're making a withdrawal for a specific purpose, that you only withdraw what you need and you use that money for that purpose. And then if you have a miscellaneous, or what a lot of people call a mad money category, and that's just when you want to go mad and just spend money, only have a certain set amount in that category, and once it's gone, it's gone. But you got to make sure that that category gets smaller and smaller. I don't want you to do away with it all at once, because I find that when you take things away from people all at once, then they kind of backslide into some of their old ways. So I try to ease people into cutting back on their spending and determining, okay, I was spending $200 a month and didn't know where it was going. So now I got to limit myself to 50. And then once I do that, then I have to identify, okay, how am I spending this money, and do I need to change and make it lower and lower and lower? Because if you have goals to get out of debt, mad money category should be 0. You shouldn't be out there spending no mad money on anything, because you have to make sure that your values and your goals are in alignment with your spending. And if you value getting out of debt, then you're gonna have to value for going out to eat, that miscellaneous money category, because you can come back around to that. It's just that when you're in a better financial position to do that. So I don't like to just take things away from people and not let people enjoy life. But if you have some goals, you got to decide how much you're willing to do to commit to that. So I want to ask on tonight, if anybody wants to share, when you did that exercise, were there any categories that you were surprised by, that you were spending money? When you got done, did you look at them like, man, I can't believe I spent $300 on miscellaneous stuff, and I don't even know what it was? Yeah, it does. Them $2, $3 bag of chips and a soda, $5, and you out the gas station. Yeah, yep, it is. Anybody else? Come on now, y'all, don't be ashamed. You, Luana. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. Did you have any cash withdrawals? No? Okay. No takeout? No pizza deliveries? Okay. Does it really? Do you want to get out of debt? Do you want to get out of debt? So do those Friday pizza deliveries, can you downsize them to 2 instead of every Friday? What do you want in life and what are you willing to do to obtain it? So if you don't want to give up your pizza, you don't have to. I'm just getting you to, pardon me?
Something else would have to fall off.
Yes.
Not pizza is going to be something less.
Yeah. You give a little, you take a little, but you got to determine what do you want in life and what are you willing to do to obtain it. And if you want to get out of debt, I think I will forego some pizza nights just to, those are the things that you have to look at. Not trying to put you on the spot or anything, but I'm just saying when people come to me and they tell me what they want, then when I tell them what it takes to get there, they most of the time aren't willing to do it. They're like, but you know what, we got to have this. We got to do that. Do you really? So that's just, you got to ask yourself that and be, just think of it that way. Okay. Anybody else want to share? Yeah, because when you set a budget, you don't set it for with exceptions. You set it to stick to it to reach the end goal. So you can't try to, justify, and it goes back to what I said in the last session, our mindsets and how we think. We got to change that because we can talk ourselves into spending money on anything if we want to. So you just got to think about your goals, like the roadmap, like I said. This is your starting point. Your ending point is what? Getting out of debt. Your ending point is buying a home. Your ending point is whatever it may be. You got to decide from the starting point to the ending point what you're willing to do in between so that you can get there successfully. And if that means you got to go into construction, which means, okay, we're going to have to, when we go into construction, we're going to have to really revamp some things. You got it, you do it. And you want to change your route. Okay, I'm not going to take that route because that's the long way. The long way is when I justify having these things. But I'm going to take the short way, and that means that I'm going to make some sacrifices and delay some things to get there quicker. That's all I'm saying. One thing that I did when I first started this is at first I cut out everything and I was miserable. So I really don't recommend that people do that. I recommend that you kind of gradually, by doing that worksheet, you gradually adjust and change. And as you start to gain momentum, you get motivated and you be like, oh, I don't need to do that. I'm gonna put that money in my savings or in my emergency fund. If you don't have an emergency fund, that's where, start there. Getting that emergency fund established. And I gave a worksheet out that gives a sample of when you start that emergency fund, you can follow the schedule that I gave, which is putting $25 away biweekly to get to the $500 by the end of the year, or you make your own schedule. Mr. Doug, did you have a question?
I made a decision just this week based on what you were teaching, and I gave up the cable, and that was a big savings. Would you suggest that whatever the savings is, that you just include that in your budget or put it in a fund?
I would.
Would you just decrease the budget if I'm cutting out $125? Would I just leave that as a deduction, or would I take that $125 and put it in somewhere else?
I would suggest if you have debt that you put that money towards debt. Because you always, if you take something out of the budget, you gotta find somewhere to put it. It's kind of like if you have you have inventory and you're stocking something, and everything has a place. So when you take something out of this place, you gotta put it back somewhere else. Or even a puzzle, every piece fits. So you can't have just something hanging out here that has nowhere to go. You have to identify where you're gonna replace it. When you cut the cable out, then you say, okay, I'm putting this towards debt, or I'm gonna use this to start my emergency fund. Yep, okay. So when you think about a goal, I think a lot of times when people say, I'm gonna have a goal to create this emergency fund, they think about it, but they don't come up with a plan. And so really it's like an idea that comes to your mind. You then have to envision it. You gotta plan it, and then you gotta commit to achieving it. So with the example of the $500 emergency fund, you envision it. You envision, when I get this $500 emergency fund, this is what it's gonna do for me. It's gonna allow me to be able to just pay for an emergency without stressing about it. Then you gotta plan it. You gotta say, okay, now I gotta write this thing down. I can't just talk about it. I gotta put it in writing and then be about it. And then you gotta commit. You gotta say, no matter what, if I put $25 in my budget bi-weekly that I'm gonna put this money in a savings account, you gotta just do it. And so when you set up some strong goals, it's gonna cause you to change some bad habits and some negative mindsets. You're gonna alter those to adapt useful and positive mindsets to help you achieve the results that you want to obtain. And so I look at sometimes, especially like getting out of debt, it's like a birthing process. It's like real painful. And that's how I kind of relate it. I know some of the men can't relate to it, but just, or growing. When you grow, when you're younger and you start to grow, your bones or your body aches because you're expanding. And it's just like, that's how I kind of relate it to, is just saying, okay, it's gonna be painful, but in the end, I always look at the end result and see where that's gonna put me. And so you have to kind of look at it as a big picture and don't get so focused on what you gotta give up. Focus more on what you're going to gain. And that's gonna help you gain momentum. And I think that a lot of times when I coach people and when I'm telling them all these things and explain some of the things, because some people will tell me, look at my budget and tell me what I don't need. What would you take away? And when I do, they're real discouraged, they're sad. But then once they start to see the debt go down and the credit score go up and the different things change in their life, their level of the stress goes down, then they gain momentum and they're motivated and like, oh, okay, what's next? So some people just need a push, or they need someone to coach them, to celebrate them, to, get them going, and then they can kind of follow it through. And some people need accountability partners, someone that's going to go through this journey with you and say, you know what, we're in this together. We're going to see this through. So here's some principles that I established for myself when I set up goals. The first thing I'm going to do is I got to be committed. Going into this, I got to set in my mind that I'm committed to it, because commitment is everything. Then after that, I got to write it down. I got to decide that I'm going to put it into writing, and I'm going to use the SMART acronym. I'm going to make sure that I have an outline, and in your packets, there is a worksheet that outlines the SMART acronym, and it's kind of colorful. It's red and black and green and orange, and it talks about goals, and use that as an outline to do your SMART acronym. You want to make sure your goals are, that you answer all those questions. And then I want to make sure that my goal is connected to something, that it has a bigger purpose, that my goals are connected to my values, because the things that I hold to be true and the things that I believe in, if they're connected with my goals, I'm going to be more apt to achieve them. Then I want to make sure I have a variety, that I'm not just striving to get my finances in order, because as I said before, everything's connected to your money. So you want to make sure spiritual, physical, your career, your social life, that all of those things that you're kind of connecting them to your financial goals. Because once you kind of get a balance with those things, you're going to find your finances will start to take shape, and you'll start to see some positive results. And then along the way, you want to make sure that you are tracking your progress, so that if you have gotten off course, you can get back on course. It won't take months and months and months before you decide that, oh, I've spent another $200 and I don't know what happened to it. That you want to make sure that every now and then, and I usually every month, I'm tracking my spending, because I want to make sure that I'm not just spending my money on frivolous things or being impulsive, because it's easy to do. You can, go out to the mall sometimes and you see a big sale, and before you know it, you spent, $200-300, and when you get back home to pay bills, you're like, oh, my checking account balance is a couple $100 short. So I always recommend that people track their progress, because it also helps you to stay motivated and stick with the plan. Because one thing about it, once you start to see the results, you're going to get excited. You're going to be like, okay, this is working. So I just usually try to tell people to do those things. So you want to be committed. You want to make sure you're connected to a greater purpose, that you have a variety of goals that you're working towards, that you write them down using that SMART acronym, and that you're tracking your progress. And so here is the SMART acronym. You want to make sure your goal is specific. What is it that you're specifically wanting to do? Make sure it's not vague, because if it's vague, then you're not going to be able to follow through with it. You want to make sure it's measurable. How will I know when I've reached this goal? The $500 emergency fund worksheet that I gave you guys, goal worksheet, you're going to know when you reach it at December 31st when you've got $500 in your account. And you're going to know bi-weekly if you're deducting that $25 and putting it in a separate savings, you're going to see it growing. From one week, bi-weekly to the next, the balance is going to just keep climbing. Then you want to make sure it's attainable. And how you're going to know it's attainable is looking at your budget. Is this possible for me to set aside $25 bi-weekly or whenever you decide? Is it realistic? Can I achieve this? At the current space and place that I'm in and with my finances, is it realistic for me to put $25 aside? And I would say, yeah, if you look at some of your miscellaneous spending, you can take it right out of there, and you won't even know it's gone. And so then you want to make sure it's timely. And I would think between now and the end of the year is it's a good time frame to try to establish your emergency fund. And if you want to establish it for more than $1,000, then you just increase your biweekly deductions and say, okay, instead of 25, I'm gonna do 50. And by the end of the year, I'll have $1,000. But you determine what you want your emergency fund to be. based upon your household needs and your financial obligations. Can your budget be stretched an extra $50 to create that emergency fund? Or do you need to just try to stick with the 25 and work your way up? I always tell people start somewhere, even if you have to start small. Even if you can't afford 25, if you can only do 10, do something. Don't just not do anything at all, because this is your way of providing yourself with peace of mind. So when an emergency comes up, even if you don't have all the money to cover it, you got something. And you don't have to fall back on credit cards and create more debt for yourself. So establishing that emergency fund is really important and it's essential. And so here again, the sample of the $500 emergency fund. I believe that I touched on all of I touched on the SMART acronym. It's specific, it's measurable, it's attainable, it's realistic, and it's timely. And so I said to obtain a $500 emergency fund by December 31st of 2022 by transferring $25 biweekly into a separate savings account. So on that goal worksheet that I gave you guys, I want you to fill that out, and I want you to come up with one goal for yourself that you're going to do between now and the end of the year. And I want you to use that SMART acronym to figure out how you're going to achieve that goal. And so it's going to be on that worksheet that has the box at the top that talks about goals and making a plan, and it's real colorful. And then it has specific, it lists them all out. That's the worksheet that you're going to use, because there's lines on there for you to fill it out and for you to put specifically what you want, how you're going to measure it, if it's attainable, is it realistic, and is it timely? And it's timely by putting a timeline on it and making sure that what I did is I gave you a schedule. That lets you know it's timely because you've got a start date, you've got an end date, you got a start amount, which is 0, and it shows you every step along the way how much you're going to save as you continue on. So now we're going to switch gears here, but before I do start talking about budgeting, I just wanted to see if anyone has any questions about goals. Nope. Okay. So this is the part I love budgeting. I like determining how I'm going to spend my money, and figuring out ways that I can cut back on my spending. And sometimes I do spend a little bit more in some categories because it makes sense for me. So here's an example. I recently started using a service called HelloFresh. And they deliver a meal, they deliver a recipe, step-by-step instructions, give you everything in the pack that you need to prepare that meal. And so it's a little bit on the pricier side, but I had a purpose with doing this. One, I wanted to learn how to cook better. For another, I wanted to learn how to do, combination with meals and how to put things together, and then to learn how to try some new things. And then I didn't have to go to the store. And then different things that I wouldn't potentially have in my cupboard or in my cabinet came in that bag. So I didn't have to buy a whole lot of stuff that I would never use again. It gave me just what I needed. And so my plan going into this, because I knew it was going to be on the pricier side, was to do it for a short period to get out of it what I wanted. My goal was to learn how to cook and prepare meals and put meals together. I wanted to be able to find out different ingredients that go together. So I think I did this for about a month or two, and I'm kind of ending the process. So I got out of it what I wanted, and now I'm not going to do it anymore, because now I have some ideas of meal prepping and how to put things together. And so in your budget, you got to decide some things that are worth spending that money for. but what purpose does it serve, and what's your plan with it? And so HelloFresh, it met what my plans were. So now I'm done. And so now I can start working on my meal prepping. And that's where it's going to save me from going out to eat and also not eating healthy. So by doing the HelloFresh, it helped me to get together with planning meals, meal prepping, not spending as much money. So now I can move on. So when you create your budget is going to be a breakdown of how much money you got coming in, how much money you've got going out, what you're going to be spending it on. And then that way, I always tell people to start off with a summary of all your bills. And there is a sheet in there, 2 sheets, that kind of categorizes your expenses for you to fill out. And then it also tells you, when I talked about the bank accounts, which bank account you're going to have those expenses come from, but we'll get to that. And so then it really just sets things up for you where you know all your main expenses, your financial obligations that you don't have, you have to pay them. It's going to come from one checking account. Then you're going to have another checking account that's going to talk about your lifestyle spending. So we'll get to that part too, but here's some tips that I have to share with regards to budgeting. You always want to make sure before you budget your money before the month begins. So that way you already know. I already know how I'm going to spend my money for March. So when March comes, I'm ready to go. Then you want to make sure you also consider semi-annual or quarterly expenses like car insurance, life insurance. You want to make sure that you don't forget to put those in your budget, because since they only come out quarterly or annually, if we forget about them, then it throws your whole budget off. You want to make sure you incorporate saving for an emergency fund in your budget. You got to do it. You want to save for big expenses and holiday planning and spending. Some people set up a Christmas club to set money aside, so when holiday comes, they have their money and this is all they're going to spend, and then they use that, and once it's gone, it's gone. You kind of you're setting yourself up to be more disciplined and more intentional about your spending when you start to plan, and you're developing a better relationship with your money. And you're controlling where your money's going to go instead of your money controlling you by having to work overtime, having to, do all these different things to get your income up to compensate for some poor decisions or choices that we've made. You want to make sure you set realistic spending limits when you're evaluating your spending. How I talked about before, I wouldn't recommend cutting everything cold turkey. I would recommend that you bring down your miscellaneous or lifestyle spending to a comfortable level, and then gradually keep bringing it down. And so when you do that, you can do it one of 2 ways. You can go to a cash-only system and put that money in an envelope, and once at the end of the month, if it's gone, or at the middle of the month it's gone, then you've spent your money for the month, and you don't do anything else until the next month. And that just tends to work for some people, and it helps them to stay on track and stay disciplined. Or you can just say, track it with your debit card, and keep your receipts. That to me is just more tedious. The cash system works great because once the money's gone, it's gone. And then your miscellaneous or mad money categories should get smaller and smaller until you can afford for it to be bigger. If you have debt, if you are late on bills, you really shouldn't have a mad money category, because those things are not, those are privileges. Those things are not things that we're entitled to. And so here are some common budget issues that I've encountered in working with different people, or even with myself, where your expenses are more than your income. So when your expenses are more than your income, you tend to you're spending more than you got coming in, and so you're having shortfalls, and so then that's when we cause ourselves to fall back on credit cards, because we've spent our money, so now we start spending other people's money that we got to pay back. And so I usually just tell people when their spending is out of whack, you need to cut all unnecessary spending until you get your finances under control. And that is developed through doing that spending analysis. When you determine, you can see where your spending is out of control. And then if you have cash flow issues, with the cash flow issues, that is, you make enough money, but most of your bills are due at the same time. And so like some people have a lot of their bills due at the beginning of the month. Well, then they don't have enough money to pay those bills because they got to wait till their next pay period. So you got to get yourself to a point where you divide up your expenses between your two pay periods and decide which bills are going to be paid with this paycheck, which bills are going to be paid with that one, until you can get yourself on a schedule. And if you have more money in your second paycheck, don't spend it. You got to remember, at the beginning of the month is when I fall short, so I got to start using some of this money to cover those shortfalls at the beginning of the month. It's just all about altering. None of this stuff is difficult. It's not, you don't have to have a college degree to figure these things out. You just got to be more intentional and mindful of what you're doing. And so the problem categories, that is when you just spending too much money on unnecessary things. And your spending is out of control. Those things we can control. And you got to get a handle on it. You can't just continue to keep going on and thinking that things are going to miraculously change. Then you're budgeting on a variable income. One of my clients was a teacher, and so teachers only work 9 months out the year. So in the summer months when they're not working, if they don't allocate their paychecks properly, then they don't get an income in the summer. And so she was like, every summer this just keeps happening to me. I need to find another job, or I need, it's like, well, you gotta start thinking about that at the beginning of the year. Don't wait till summer and decide how you're gonna pay your bills, because you don't have any money. So some of the recommendations that I gave to her was, when you get your tax refund, remember that you're gonna have a shortfall in the summer. Or start planning to get a part-time job in the summer, or plan how you're going to compensate for that lost income. Don't wait until it happens. Be proactive and decide what you're going to do. And when you get a bonus at work, don't just spend it, because it's real easy to do. You think, I'm getting a $200 bonus, and you really aren't getting that much, because after they take taxes, you're left with $50. So you really convince yourself that you might as well just treat yourself, because it's only $50, but that $50 can do a whole lot. Point is, when you know you've got extra money, don't decide to just spend it to treat yourself. Think ahead about how you can incorporate that into your budget to lighten the load of stress or anything that you encounter due to financial issues. So one thing that I wanted to also mention into this, that choosing a bank. Some people just have one bank account. And so I always tell people, you need to have a good balance or a mix with your banking, because you want to make sure that you do business with a bank, and then you have an account with a credit union, because each one has their own products and services that are better than others. Credit unions tend to offer things like rebates for your debit card. Their rates are potentially lower. They usually don't have a lot of fees. So I usually tell people, plus you want to make sure you're giving yourself options. So if you need a certain product or service, you have more than one place you can go to decide who's going to give you the best for your money. One thing that you also want to do is, if you're saving money and you're putting your money into account, make sure the bank is FDIC insured, because you want to make sure that if the bank gets robbed or something happens drastic, that you won't lose your money, that it's insured. You want to make sure there's minimal fees. find products and services that fit your needs, but you also want to make sure you're choosing a bank that's going to provide you with potential to grow. And what I mean by that is, when you're young, yeah, you choose a bank based upon, just basic checking and savings. But as you get older and your financial situation change, is that bank going to be able to be my lending institution? Can I invest with that bank? Do they provide, some of the credit unions provide travel. Some of them provide insurance where you can get insurance for your car. So look at the big picture of all the products and services that they offer. Make sure, one, that they're meeting your current needs, but make sure that when you get your act together and your finances in order, that you can also do more business with them and that it's going to help your financial situation. One thing that I like is linked accounts. Credit unions tend to offer this, where you can have multiple accounts under one account number. And what I mean by that is you can have 2 savings, a money market, a checking, and all of those are linked under one bank account. So with my credit union, I have my savings, I have my bill account, I have my money market account, and I have my checking account. So between those 3 accounts, I can operate and run my finances through one account, move money, decide if I want to, put more money in my money market and the rates aren't good now anyways, but still, and then I also like with some credit unions, they offer cash back for debit card purchases. Last year, I got $130 in cash back just for swiping my debit card. And it was on stuff that I was going to spend money on anyways. I gained a better cash back rebate from my checking account than I did my credit card. Granted, because I'm not using my credit card like that and I don't want to. I don't want to rack up any debt. But if you're going to use your debit card and it's on expenses that you're going to spend money for anyways, why not benefit from it? So every year, twice a year, I go into my account, log into my account, and I check and see how much money I have for rebates. And you can request that money to just be deposited to your savings account and use that money for, pay down debt or to help build your emergency fund. And then you also want to make sure that they provide online banking. You want to be able to access your account from your mobile device, from your laptop, anywhere. So that is one thing that you want, and most banks do. I don't know of any that don't. And again, like I said before, products and services that are going to allow you the opportunity to grow, because you don't plan on staying where you are with your finances. You want to strive to do better, and so you want to make sure you're not limiting yourself. And so here is the bank account structure that I recommend. I recommend that you have, again, 2 accounts, one with the bank, one with the credit union. And then within those financial institutions, you're going to have 2 savings accounts. You can have one at each one, but you want to have one savings account just as a regular savings account that you use for saving for big purchases, that you use for saving for vacation. Then you have your emergency fund savings account that you're only going to touch in case of an emergency. And we all know what emergencies are. It can't be, oh Lord, we having a conference at my church and I need to buy a new outfit. That is not an emergency. Or I'm going to a concert and I need to look fly. No, that's not an emergency. And you want to remember to save with purpose. Don't save just to be saving, because when you do, you're going to be like, what am I saving this money for? I might as well spend it. No. Identify what that money is going to be used for, and you're more apt to not touch it because you already then earmarked it for something. But if you just got it sitting in that savings account and you don't know what it's for, you're going to go in there and you're going to keep every now and then $20 here, $30 there. No, when you identify and put a name on it, then you won't touch it because you're like, nope, that money is for my vacation. Nope, that money is for me to buy a new car or have a nice down payment to buy a house. And then for your checking accounts, I recommend 2 checking accounts. One is for your bills and your main financial obligations. This account is going to be for things that you have to pay. It's going to be your mortgage, your car loan, your car insurance, things that you can't get out of paying because you have to pay them. Your utilities, none of those things are going to change. You have to pay them. Then you're going to have one checking account that I like to call a lifestyle checking account. That account is an account that you can, things aren't fixed. They're variable. You can alter them, you can do away, you can add, but you want to make sure that you fund your main checking account first to make sure that all your financial obligations are being met. And with that lifestyle checking, then that way once whatever's left and you've got in there, then it's going to make you change how you spend your money. Because then you're not going to be spending your bill money to buy things that you don't need because you've already set that bill money aside. So now in the lifestyle checking account, that's all I got to work with. So I got to decide, how many gifts I'm giving out this time or when I'm going to go out to eat or just different things that we can adjust. And so then here's some suggestions or ways that you can create your budget. First, you want to make sure that you fund your checking accounts accordingly, that you put your money aside in your emergency fund, you take care of all those things, and then you gather all your bills because it's important to understand when you're first starting to create your budget what your financial obligations are and how you're spending your money. So that way you can create your budget in order for you to succeed. You want to record all sources of your income, not just your paycheck that you get from your job. If you're expecting to get a bonus, put it in there. If you're, like I said with my rebate, when I got that money, I had to put it in my budget. When you get your tax refund, put it in your budget. Everything that comes in, just as well as anything that's going out, needs to be in your budget. Then you want to create a list of all your monthly expenses, which will go on that budget and spending worksheet. And on that worksheet, it's going to show you which bank account you should use for that expense. And then once you total all your expenses and you subtract them from your income, then you see how much money you got left over. And now you got to decide what you're going to do with that money because you need to balance your budget to zero, where there's nothing left. Because when you got money left over, you always going to find a way to spend it. So you always want to make sure that every month, when you are done with your budget, you told everything has a place. And when you put everything in its proper place, then you start to see progress and growth, and you start to better understand where you are financially. And then, again, establish which bank account is used for what expense. And on that worksheet, it does give you an idea. I think I've tried to list everything that could possibly be an expense. And if you have any others, you can just add them to the other category. And so your homework tonight is going to be to complete the SMART goal worksheet and to complete the budget and spending worksheet. So you're going to come up with one goal that you want to achieve between now and the end of the year. And then you want to fill out that budgeting worksheet so you can identify your financial obligations, your spending, and you want to put a spending limit on some things so that you can start tackling some debt or creating that emergency fund that you might need. So I am done on tonight. Does anybody have any questions, comments, anything? Luana? Because when you have a bank and a credit union, let's say you need to get a car loan. One might have better rates than the other. And if you only have an account with a bank, you have nothing else to consider or to use as leverage to get the rate that you need. And then also, some banks have fees that credit unions wouldn't have. And you also want to make sure that you're setting yourself up for when you do need to make decisions that you have options. You don't want to just have one option, to only be able to go to that one bank. So, and I have found that I use my credit union account more than I do my bank account. So, yeah, it's your own personal preference, but I have found that also there's some things that better rates I've gotten from a bank that I couldn't get from the credit union. So I just like to be able to have options to choose from where I'm not just stuck in one category and then where I have to go to them because that's all I have. It's building a relationship. You're building a relationship with that financial institution. And so sometimes you can go to them and say, look, credit union was going to give me 2%. What can you do for me? You might be able to get better. But if you don't have more than one account, then you can't use that as leverage. Yes. Mm-hmm. I'm an accounting person, so I balance everything. Everything is to the penny. I don't round up, I don't round down, because I want to know exactly what my money is doing. So, and it's your own personal preference. If that works for you, and then hey, but I just like knowing every little penny, where it's going and what it's doing. One other thing I wanted to mention about banks, and that I don't know if everyone is aware of, you want to make sure that you have a beneficiary tied to your bank account. Because in the event of your passing, you may think that your family can access that account, but they can't. They would have to go through probate court to be able to access that money. So me being single, I'm like, oh, I need to do something different, because if something happens to me, I want my son to be able to access my money. So if you're married, you want to make sure that even if your spouse is not joined on the account, at least assign them as beneficiary. So in the event that you pass away, that's all they got to do is go to the credit union and say, hey, they have this on file. I'm the beneficiary. Here's the death certificate. I need to make a withdrawal to that account. Karen?
Can you elaborate a little bit more on like the products and services? You know, most times we don't use a product or a service as banks. So can you give me just a little bit more specificity about that?
Yes. For lending, for savings, for investments, the different ways you can use the account. Like one bank has where you can use Zilly to transfer money if you need to. That would have been very useful for me when my son was away at college, for me to be able to send him money that way. Through my credit union, I'm joined on his account so I can put money in his account, but it didn't do him any good because they didn't have one where he went to school. And then also through credit unions, they offer auto insurance discounts. So I was able to do a lot of business just through my credit union because I had my car insurance, I had my home insurance, I did my lending, I did my savings, I was able to get some information about investments. So just making sure that you're checking out their products and the services that they offer to see if you can make use of that now or in the future. Does that answer your question?
It does.
Okay. Mr. Doug?
What's your opinion of banking outside of the state, such as the banks, black banks that they are that's flourishing in Atlanta or elsewhere? would you be skeptical of putting your, I guess, trust in an out-of-state bank?
Not if it's a reputable bank and not if they're FDIC insured. And I think that's a good way of not having access to that money. It's a good way to save. And so that's one way that I save, is because I have an account with an institution that is not, they don't have a lot of locations. It's out of the way. It's an inconvenience for me to get to that money. So by the time I think about it and all the trouble that I got to go through to get that money, it's like, you know, it's like, forget it. I might as well not even buy that, because I got to go through all these hoops to get to that money. So those are ways that you can help discipline yourself and set yourself up to gain better ways of saving without, you know, putting yourself out or putting yourself in a bind.
What do you think about Cash App?
I use it. I was kicking and screaming doing it, but I do use it because I find it's beneficial for me to send money to people that live out of town, or, you know, I use it to tithe. So I use it, but I only use it with a purpose. And my son just started making me use Apple Store. I'm like, I don't really want to do it, but he was like, Mom, you need to get Apple. Come up with the times. And I'm like, no, I really, Darius, I just don't want to do that. I want all that stuff. So I had to do it. I just like to be able to have more control over my money, and I don't want to give anybody any way to compromise that. So I'm very picky about stuff like that. And one thing that I do that some people don't agree with is I have a specific credit card that I use when I need to make larger purchases, like for appliances or, you know, different things. I have a Best Buy credit card. And I use it because they usually have a 24-month, zero, no cash, no interest. And for 24 months, I can spend somebody else's money just as long as I incorporate those monthly payments into my budget. Then when the 24 months is over, you know, as opposed to me taking that money from my savings to buy it. And the perfect example is when I bought my house, it didn't have a washer and dryer. So I used my Best Buy credit card to purchase the washer and dryer on the 0% interest. As long as I paid it off in 24 months, I didn't pay any interest. I could have took that money from my savings account, but I didn't want to do that because it was like, why not leverage this to use somebody else's money? And you know, people will come back and say, well, what if something happens and you don't have the money to pay it? That's the risk I'm willing to take it because I got 24 months to figure it out. So I just wanted to share, with me being Dave Ramsey trained, I know a lot of people, you know Dave Ramsey, he talks about not having credit, not having debt. I agree with that to a certain extent. So if anyone was coming here expecting me to teach and preach on credit and debt, and over the next few workshops, I'm going to kind of talk about it in a different light and how we can use it to benefit us and leverage our purchasing power and use it with purpose and be intentional with that, because I believe it's important to have a good credit score. And I believe that there is a way for people to use credit responsibly, and that we should not limit ourselves to being told by society how things should be done. I'm a bit of a rebel. I color outside the lines. When someone tell me that something can be done, I'm gonna try to make sure I find out how it can, because I'm a living example of knowing that credit can be used responsibly. And so I just want to be able to teach others how to do that. Because in the day and age that we live in, it's not realistic for people to spend cash for a car. It's not realistic for people to spend cash for a house. So why not teach them how to build their credit and use it responsibly? So hopefully I didn't disappoint anyone by that. So I'm done on tonight. If no one has any other questions, I want to thank, if we're able to get online, thank the online people that were able to participate. And I look forward to seeing you guys at the next workshop. Every workshop we have handouts. You can ask questions. I did set up the Facebook group. A couple of people are on there, but if anyone wants to join, just send me an invite. It's Financial Literacy with Paulette, and you can join that group.
What about do you have recordings for what we missed?
Yes, that is, you can go to YouTube to Financial Literacy with Paulette. Is it going to be session 2, Charles?
Yeah, I couldn't get it live tonight, but I'll upload it when I get back home tonight, so it'll be up there this evening. I'll send it to you.
Okay. And then they can also search on YouTube to find the video as well, right?
It'll be on the same YouTube channel that this one will be on, so they'll both be on the same YouTube channel.
And it's Financial Literacy with Paulette?
On YouTube, it's the Hope YouTube channel that this is on.
Okay.
So they're both, yeah.
Because I think the last time I searched Financial Literacy with Paulette.
Yeah, that's the title.
Yeah, but I'm saying that's how they can find it.
Session 2.
Yep, that's how they can find it.
So that is on homepage and YouTube,
Yeah, it'll be on the Facebook page and the YouTube page.
Facebook, okay.
Okay, cool. So if you guys don't have anything else, I'm done for tonight.